Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen. How horrible of you to join us. Curl up, invite your friends, and by all means, make sure those lights are out. That way it's harder to tell what may or may not be lurking around you. There's nothing like a good mystery, am I right? Tonight will feature a singular tale of devilish design curated by those wicked weavers of woe. And without further ado, allow me to pass the reins on over to our vivacious voiceover virtuoso Trey Falco for tonight's sinister story. Please keep all limbs and side covers at all times. We wouldn't want anything to go missing now, would we?
This is a bad idea. I couldn't imagine Melissa finding it encouraging, but I said it anyway. Once again, we found ourselves at the end of Mrs. Hudson's empty driveway. I knew this was the last chance either one of us had to back down. One final opportunity to run away, to try and forget about Damien and move on with our lives. I know. Melissa cracked her knuckles, just like they do in the movies. I bet she thought she looked pretty cool, and she was right. Her hair wound up in a tight bun as slick and professional as a 15-year-old could manage. Over the last few weeks, she'd really started to get her shit back together. It was true for both of us, really. We'd found a purpose again. Let's get started. I dropped the duffel bag and Melissa knelt to unzip it. She wasn't as careful or quiet as Damien had been, but it didn't seem to make a difference. I was the lookout as Melissa got to work. I scanned the road and then looked back to the house, my eyes locked on the window above the garage. This time, the curtains were still. It took Melissa even longer to cut the chain than I had expected. I bounced up and down quietly as I waited. When a car turned up onto the street, I tapped Melissa on the shoulder to get her attention. We both scampered to the side of the garage, kneeling there until it passed. While we crouched, she whispered that she was almost done. We crept back to the garage, Melissa armed with her bolt cutter. We had found a way around letting the metal chain smash to the ground, but it was more awkward in practice than in theory. Reaching over her head, I grabbed a hold of a side of the chain in each hand as Melissa finished the job. It was heavy and I almost dropped them, but I steadied myself and set the chain gently on the ground. It scraped slowly along the concrete as it settled into place, but it wasn't nearly as loud as letting it fall. Instinctively, I stepped backwards, checking on the window. No movement so far. I listened for movement inside the house, but all I could hear was the dull throbbing of my own pulse. Melissa backed away from the garage door, wiping the sweat off her forehead. She returned the cutters to the duffel bag, pulling out a metal coat hanger and handing it to me. Now, it was her turn to keep watch, though she didn't need to watch for long. Disengaging the garage door's safety release was even easier than the YouTube videos had made it look. Less than a minute later, I tucked the hanger back into the bag. I zipped it up and slung it over my shoulder, and I looked over at Melissa and we nodded to each other. We reached down to the bottom of the garage, and together, hearts pounding like jackhammers, we rolled it up. I couldn't see anything, not at first. My eyes needed time to adjust. The first sense of mine that kicked into high gear was smell. It wasn't horrible, no overwhelming scent of rotting flesh, no metallic scent of blood. It just smelled like a barn. In tandem, Melissa and I reached for our pockets and grabbed our cell phones, lighting the flashlights to get a better look around. The garage didn't just smell like a barn, it looked like a barn. The floor was coated in shredded newspapers, thin strips of fabric, and honest-to-God hay. I took a step forward into the mess to find just how deep it was. Past my ankles. Gross. What the fuck is this? I heard Melissa whisper behind me. Hell if I know. We swept our lights across the room. For such a large garage, it was mostly empty. Sure, the floor was 6 inches of concentrated muck, but there weren't the toolboxes and recycling bins that you'd expect. The most prominent features were an upright freezer in the back right corner and a metal shelf filled with mason jars along the left wall. I took an uneasy step toward the jars and then another. Something deep inside me told me that they weren't going to be full of pasta sauce. Steeling myself for what I might see, I took a slow breath before angling the light up at the jars. For a moment, I thought I might have been wrong about the pasta sauce. All of the jars were filled with a red fluid in any case. The way the light shone through the glass and its contents gave me the impression that it was something viscous, and I was confident in my guess of what it might be. I felt my inside squirm as I tried not to think too hard about where it came from. Worse still was the crimson-stained baby bottle sitting next to the jars. I tried not to dwell on the questions that raised. It was then that I noticed that the jars were labeled, and I wanted to get a closer look. With a shaky hand, I reached for one on the bottom shelf, and I almost dropped it when I heard the sound of the freezer opening in the corner. Fuck! Sorry. Melissa sounded like she meant it. The open freezer had an inbuilt light, making our surroundings a bit clearer at the expense of scaring me half to death. Regaining my composure, I angled the flashlight towards the jar I'd picked up. The label was a piece of masking tape, handwritten letters spelling out a date. January 12th. Oh shit. I turned towards the glow of the open freezer. I think this blood is... Melissa? Melissa's face was pale as she stared into the icebox. Her eyes were wide and her jaw slack, jar in one hand and phone in the other. I trudged through the debris to see what had spooked her. As I came up beside her, she choked out one word. Hearts. Hearts. 6 neatly stacked blue and clear Tupperware containers, each containing a single mass of muscle. In truth, it wasn't as gory as it sounds. Clearly, care had been taken to package each heart away. Like the blood, each container had its own handwritten label on the front. My eyes searched across the containers until... there it was, right on top. January 12th. Pictures. Melissa sounded hoarse. What? Pictures, Parker. We need pictures, and we need to get the hell out of here. To this day, I'm thankful Melissa was able to pull herself together and think straight. I think if she hadn't... I don't know. But I don't think I would have remembered to take photos. I think I would have just left. We silently snapped photos of the blood, the hearts, the messy floor, and the crate. The crate. I hadn't seen it coming in, but I don't know how I missed it. It was about 2 cubic feet, nestled in the mess near the freezer. I knelt down beside it, trying to brace myself for whatever fresh, gory mess undoubtedly lay within, and flipped off the lid.
Oh, would you please calm down? We haven't even gotten to the maiming yet. Sorry about that, dear listeners. Is it time for a sponsor break already? Well, you're in luck because I've got the perfect one in mind. Tell me, friends, are you tired of those tenacious teenagers running amok in your neighborhood, vandalizing your hard-earned property? How about that one guy who always insists on mowing his lawn at 7:30 on a Saturday morning? Have you tried everything? No, I mean everything. And they keep on coming back? Well, it sounds like it's time for you to call the Scream Team. Voorhees, Kruger & Associates, Killers at Large. Specializing in pest control, extermination, and dreamwalking, they will ensure your neighborhood is peaceful, tranquil, and free of any unwanted pests. Guaranteed. Efficiency is the core of everything they do at Voorhees, Kruger & Associates. With their patented 5-step killing method, you can rest assured knowing that the job you want done will be handled quickly, quietly, and without too much mess. With several different plans to choose from, including dismemberment, disembowelment, dream stalking, and more, no 2 jobs will ever be done the same way. As they say, variety is the spice of life. Looking for something a little more custom-suited to your problem? Then choose Other when selecting your preferred method of extermination and let your creativity run wild. They also offer pest deterrence and relocation packages, but come on. You wouldn't be calling them if that's how you wanted to handle this situation. Let's be honest. Be sure to use coupon code KILLERSAVINGS, all one word, at checkout to get half off your first extermination. The best part about this deal is that you get to choose which half to keep, the top half or the bottom half. or the left or right if you're into that kind of thing.
That's killer savings at checkout to get half off your first extermination. Voorhees, Kruger & Associates, killers at large. Why call the rest when you can call the best? Now, I've got to get back to what I was doing before you rudely interrupted me. Now be gone. You've got a story to finish.
Now, where were we?
The thing in the crate screamed. I screamed. Stop screaming! Melissa screamed. Staring up at me was a baby animal, but it looked unlike any baby animal I had ever seen. No, that wasn't entirely correct. It looked like multiple baby animals that I had seen, mashed into one. Something a taxidermist with a sick sense of humor might cobble together on a slow day. Its head was like a melanistic deer's, complete with tiny black antler nubs. The back half of it looked like a huge baby bird, black, wrinkled skin, wings and all. Its front legs bucked at the side of the crate in distress, and it flapped its wings uselessly. Its mouth was open in distress, showcasing an incomplete set of knife-like teeth. Its clawed hind legs scratched the wood. It would have almost been cute if it weren't for the screaming. The unmistakably human screaming. I threw the lid back on the crate, but it was too late. The creature was awake, and it had no intentions of falling back asleep. Melissa came up behind me and grabbed the back of my shirt, but I didn't need the encouragement. I was up on my feet and running towards the garage door in an instant. Together, we threw the door open. Maybe we should have closed it behind us, but we didn't. We just ran. I lagged behind Melissa by a good 2 meters. I had a vague idea that I wanted to get back to my house. I knew it was closer than Melissa's, but mostly, I wanted to run until I couldn't hear the screaming anymore. My feet ached from smacking flat against the pavement over and over again, and my chest burned from the combination of my lungs and heart working overtime. I stumbled as I turned the corner onto my street, wiping out onto the sidewalk, scraping my knees and tearing my jeans. They stung, and I cursed. Melissa slid to a stop and came back for me, reaching down to yank me from the concrete. As I got back on my feet, I heard it. Another scream, louder this time and more shrill than the first. This one didn't come from the direction of Mrs. Hudson's. I couldn't pinpoint where it originated, but I could tell it was somewhere above us. The scream was not coming from the baby thing in Mrs. Hudson's garage. It was coming from something larger. Melissa and I started moving again. We'd almost made it back to my house, which was a blessing because any longer and I was sure my lungs would have ruptured inside my chest. No way in hell was I going to try and climb the tree to get back in. It would be too much of a pain to show Melissa where to step. Sneaking in took time, something I feared we were running terminally low on. We dashed past the van in the driveway and onto my porch as another scream tore through the cool night air. My fingers like jelly, I fumbled for my keys. I missed the lock twice from shaking. Exasperated, Melissa snatched the keyring out of my hand, jamming the key into the lock with her first try. Click. I threw myself against the door, nearly falling into the house, and Melissa scrambled in after me and slammed the door behind us as the alarm began to blare. I punched the code in to silence it, then slumped on the floor. Her back against the door, Melissa slid down to join me. Frantic footsteps beat on the upper level.
Park, Melissa?
Dad's voice rang out as Pop turned on the lights. A moment later, both men were standing at the top of the staircase.
What the hell is going on?
I tried to find the words to say, but nothing came to me. What the hell was I supposed to say? Hey Dad, hey Pop, you know how my friend got mysteriously gored to death after we tried to break into an old woman's garage? Well, Melissa and I went back and did it a second time. This time, we got in, and long story short, I think there's something out there in the night that wants to kill us now.
Melissa?
Pop asked. He probably figured I didn't feel like talking. Melissa didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, the four of us lapsed into a silence. I have to call my parents. Melissa finally spoke as she stood, leaving me alone on the floor. She walked to the kitchen and I heard the gentle beeping of the dialer on the phone. Now it was just me and my parents. Parker. Pop's voice was a mixture of all the things I hated to hear the most. Fear, worry, and disappointment. Dad didn't say anything. That was even worse. I know this probably looks bad, but I can explain, honestly. Oh, thank God. For once, I had evidence. I even have photos on my phone that I can show you. Pop, still standing at the top of the stairs, still half awake, ran his hand through his hair. Photos of what? Parker, we still have no idea where you were. I gritted my teeth. This was going to be the hard part. I really think I should show you first. I'll explain later. After a moment's pause, Pop sighed and began to descend the stairs. Dad, on the other hand, didn't seem convinced. I realized the silent treatment probably wasn't going anywhere fast. I thought I'd lost my phone as I felt my pocket, and a burst of anxiety reduced me to a shaky mess. I hadn't lost it, though. For whatever reason, I'd put it in the wrong pocket. When I realized it was still there, I breathed a sigh of relief. The photos were there, too. Undeniable proof that something horrible was going on in Mrs. Hudson's garage. Pop squinted at the first of the pictures as I held the phone up for him to see. Is this tomato sauce? Did you sneak out to go canning? No! I snapped back. Pop's eyes narrowed at my tone. I'm sorry, no, it's not tomato sauce. It's blood, trust me, and... I swiped to the left. There's more. Pop stared at the photo of the hearts. For a moment, it seemed like he was trying to figure out how to justify the image to himself, to come up with an explanation other than the obvious, but he couldn't. His hand went to his face, rubbing his eyes as if there was a way he could be seeing things wrong. What is it? Dad had descended halfway down the stairs while we'd been talking. I guess he felt left out. Pop didn't show a single sign of acknowledgement. Instead, he pushed the phone away. He didn't look at me while he spoke. Parker, what did you do? No, I didn't. Listen, we broke into Mrs. Hudson's... You what? Dad shouted from the stairs, storming down to meet us. His steps were heavier than usual, and his face was turning a shade of red that rivaled the jars of blood. You broke into... It's for a good reason, I swear, I said, my voice pleading. Dad, you have to look at these... Mr. Charles? Our family feud froze into a tableau. My arms outstretched, waving a cell phone through the air, Pop, his head in his hands, defeated, Dad, 1 foot in the air, about to clear the last step. Right. Melissa was still here. Her eyes were puffy and red, but any tears that might have been there had since been wiped away. Can I stay here tonight? I don't feel safe walking home, and my parents can't pick me up this late. No one slept that night. Instead, we once again found ourselves back in the world's tensest living room. Melissa had missed out on it last time, but lucky for her, my parents made up for it. After several yelling matches, a series of expletives the likes of which I'd never heard before, and enough tears to fill a bathtub, my fathers were caught up on the whole story. Pop was seated in the chair this time. He had a hold of my phone, swiping through the pictures while Dad looked on over his shoulder. They spoke to each other too quietly for me to follow. This, I imagined, was not the sort of thing they taught you about in parenting class. Melissa and I sat side by side on the couch, both at a loss for words. She was still, save for the dead skin on her thumb she methodically picked away at. My right leg bounced like it was vital to my continued survival. The good news was that my dad seemed to believe us, about the blood in the hearts at least. They didn't really have a choice. I suppose there was a way this could have been some sick prank that Melissa and I were trying to pull, but my parents knew us well enough to know that that wasn't the case. The bad news was that they were still furious. The worst news was, we have to call the police. I smiled faintly as Dad made his declaration. Oh, turning in your own son, huh? I shouldn't have been making jokes, but the adrenaline still pumping through my veins was absolutely intoxicating. Nothing felt real. Parker, don't be a dick. Melissa mumbled next to me. My parents didn't acknowledge either comment. I leaned back into the soft leather of the couch and took a few slow breaths. I hadn't really had a moment to decompress until now, a break to really try and unpack all the shit I'd witnessed tonight. It had been a lot of shit. You gonna tell the cops about the fucked up deer baby, Dad? Dad grunted in response, and I wasn't sure if it was a yes, a no, or a warning to use better language. I didn't normally speak to him that way, but my mind was still reeling. I didn't ask again. The creature was the one thing I hadn't got a photo of, which was problematic because it was also by far the hardest to convince my dads about. Even now, I couldn't say for certain if they were taking my words at face value or if they were too stunned by the documented gore to protest. Pop looked pensive. It was hard to imagine what exactly he was thinking. I'd joked about them turning me in, but I couldn't imagine either one of my parents wanted me to go to juvie. At the same time, there was no way to move forward without telling somebody about Mrs. Hudson's garage. He cleared his throat.
We can't, David.
Excuse me? We can't go to the police. Not unless we have a way to justify how these photos were taken. I'm not going to condemn my son for... He sputtered, his eyes popping as he grasped for the words. For trying to figure out what the hell happened to Damien. He was on a tear now. If I wasn't so scared, I'd have been impressed. I sank further into the couch, hoping I wouldn't be dragged into the conversation. Besides, how useful do you think the police are going to be? If they weren't absolutely useless, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. What kind of town are we living in where a 15-year-old... No, a pair of 15-year-olds are more committed to following up on a murder than the actual authorities? When he finished, the room went dead silent. Pin drop silence. I could feel the confusion and frustration coming off of Pop in waves. Then what? Dad finally responded, but Pop cut him off. I don't know.
Welcome back, my darling deviants. Well, tell me, did you enjoy that twisted tale? Of course you did. I knew you had that air about you, that hunger for the horrific and the macabre. So, did we spook you? If not, then file a complaint with our complaint department detailing all accounts of non-spookiness you found in this video, and we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 millennia. Give or take a business eon or two. However, if you've enjoyed what you've just heard this evening, then make sure you leave a like on this video and annihilate that subscribe button. Such a small act of obedience is exactly what we need to put the food on the table around here. There's only so many days we can have refried kidney and toe jam hash before I'm absolutely sick of it. Spoiler alert, that ship sailed long ago. Now, I must bid you adieu. I've many things to take care of, and this outro is eating into my day off. Run along now. Have no fear, we'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday to bring you another terrible tale. Go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.